Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottama Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Mudirayet Nashtaprayesha Bhadresho Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtike. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 10, Chapter 3, The Birth of Lord Krishna. Text number 33. Yuvam Vai Brahmana Adishtau. Yuvam Vai Brahmana Adishtau. Praja Sarge Yada Tataha. Praja Sarge Yada Tataha. Sanniyamya Indriya Gramam Sanniyamyendriya Gramam Te Pathe Paramam Tapaha Te Pathe Paramam Tapaha Yuvam Vai Brahmana Dishto Praja Sarge Yada Tataha Sanniyamyendriya Gramam Te Pathe Paramam Tapaha. Yuvam Vai Brahmana Dishto Praja Sarge Yada Tataha Sanniyamyendriya Gramam Te Pathe Paramam Tapaha. Yuvam Vai Brahmana Dishto Praja Sarge Yada Tataha Sanniyamyendriya Gramam Imam Vai Brahmana Dishto Praja Sarge Yada Tapaha Sanniyamyendriya Gramam Te Pathe Paramam Tapaha. Yuvam, both of you, Prishni and Sutapa, why indeed Brahmana Adishtau, ordered by Lord Brahma, who is known as Pitamaha, the father of the Prajapatis. Praja Sarge, in the creation of progeny, Yada, when, Tataha, thereafter, Sanniyamya, keeping under full control, Indriya Gramam, the senses, Te Pathe, underwent, Paramam, very great, tapaha, austerity. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Translation. When both of you were ordered by Lord Brahma to create progeny, you first underwent severe austerities by controlling your senses. Please repeat this translation. When both of you were ordered by Lord Brahma to create progeny, you first underwent severe austerities by controlling your senses. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Here is an instruction about how to use one's senses to create progeny. According to Vedic principles, before creating progeny, one must fully control the senses. This control takes place through the Garbhadhana Samskara. In India, there is a great agitation for birth control in various mechanical ways. But birth cannot be mechanically controlled. As stated in Bhagavad Gita, 13th chapter, 9th verse. Janma mrityu jara vyadhi dukkha doshanu darshanam. Birth, death, old age and disease are certainly the primary distresses of the material world. People are trying to control birth, but they are not able to control death. And if one cannot control death, one cannot control birth either. In other words, artificially controlling birth is not any more feasible than artificially controlling death. According to Vedic civilization, procreation should not be contrary to religious principles, and then the birth rate will be controlled. As stated in Bhagavad Gita 7.11, Dharma viruddho bhuteshu kamosmi. Sex, not contrary to religious principles, is a representation of the Supreme Lord. People should be educated in how to give birth to good children through samskaras, beginning with the Garbhadhana samskara. Birth should not be controlled by artificial means, for this will lead to a civilization of animals. If one follows religious principles, he automatically practices birth control. Because if one is spiritually educated, he knows that the after effects of sex are various types of misery. Bahudukha bhaja. One who is spiritually advanced does not indulge in uncontrolled sex. Therefore, instead of being forced to refrain from sex or refrain from giving birth to many children, people should be spiritually educated, and then birth control will automatically follow. If one is determined to make spiritual advancement, he will not beget a child unless able to make that child a devotee. As stated in Srimad Bhagavatam 5.5.18, Pitana sasyat, one should not become a father unless one is able to protect his child from mrityu, the path of birth and death. But where is their education about this? A responsible father never begets children like cats and dogs. Instead of being encouraged to adopt artificial means of birth control, people should be educated in Krishna consciousness, because only then will they understand their responsibility to their children. If one can beget children who will be devotees and be taught to turn aside from the path of birth and death, mrityu samsara vartmani, then there is no need of birth control. Rather, one should be encouraged to beget children. Artificial means of birth control have no value. Whether one begets children or does not, a population of men who are like cats and dogs will never make human society happy. It is therefore necessary for people to be educated spiritually, so that instead of begetting children like cats and dogs, they will undergo austerities to produce devotees. This will make their lives successful. Thus ends the Bhaktivedanta purport. Om Ajnanatirmirandasya Jnananjanashalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Preshtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracha Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Dechata Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivas Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Both Devaki and Vasudeva have offered prayers to Krishna, who has appeared as their son. And Lord Krishna is speaking to them, addressing them. First of all, Lord Krishna is telling Devaki and Vasudeva that in their previous birth, in the beginning of this day of Brahma, Swayambhuva millennium, Swayambhuva Manvantara, they were known as Prishni. Devaki was known as Prishni, and Vasudeva was known as Sutapa. And both of them were ordered by Lord Brahma to create progeny. To create progeny means to create children, to beget children. And for doing so, what did they do? First, they underwent severe austerities by controlling the senses. This is totally contrary to what people think is the purpose of sex life. Modern civilization, under the influence of ignorance, people generally think sex life means a kind of enjoyment. And for materialists, those who are ever seeking material pleasure, in their conception, the sex pleasure is the highest pleasure. And all the scriptures, including Srimad Bhagavatam, is telling material pleasures are not real pleasure for a human being. Material pleasure is not real pleasure. And secondly, even among material pleasures, the highest pleasure is that kind of material pleasure which is in the mode of goodness. And the lowest material pleasure is material pleasure in the mode of ignorance. And among even tamasic pleasures, just like we easily understand, the pleasure of drinking liquor and becoming intoxicated, Any sane, sober person will understand it's a low-class pleasure. Not difficult to understand. But even among such pleasures, tamasic pleasures, low-class pleasures, the lowest is sex pleasure. And this is very shocking, at least for the materialist to hear. How do you say it is the lowest pleasure? So to understand these things from the proper source, from the scriptures, from the acharyas. Why is the pleasure of drinking liquor considered low class, abominable? It is because of the after effects. What happens after that momentary pleasure is enjoyed? That also, that momentary pleasure is when that taste of liquor comes in touch with the tongue. That's all. Finished. Over. All pleasure is finished. But the after effect, the pleasure enjoyment is over. But then the after effect is not momentary. It is going to last. And then the state of being intoxicated, is a horrible state. And that state of being intoxicated is also comparatively not so long as the after effect of what is called as addiction. That is a horrible thing. That means a little pleasure that is anyway not enough. So I want more of it. So I indulge in more drinking, more drinking, more drinking. But this human body is so designed that even if they want to enjoy more pleasure by consuming more and more and more of that liquor, still there is the point of saturation, satiation. I cannot take any more. And if I try somehow to force myself, I'll feel nausea. I'll feel like vomiting. I'll feel like very, very bad sensation. Then I'll be forced to stop by nature's arrangement, by higher arrangement, for my own good. It's not that in nature, pleasure is so designed that you can only have little. And if you try to have more, you cannot. No. That is not the way material nature is designed. For example, pleasure in the mode of goodness. Like somebody studies literature and then appreciates, in nicely composed Shakespeare's poetry, for example, or any poetry in any language, Kannada, great poets in Karnataka, Bendre, Kuvempu, they have composed wonderful poetry, classics, they have written classics. And those who are able to learn and study this kind of fine expression of language, literature, they relish that, reading it. And not just one time. Again and again and again and again, they reread. I used to visit one translator in Bangalore. Then we were translating the Bhagavatam to Kannada. And we were getting it done by these expert literature persons. And one of them was expert in one composition of one poet of the Mahabharata. So he would, when I go to visit him for, checking the translation, what he has done, the Bhagavatam, then he will ask me, have you read this particular work? Kumara Vyasa Bharata. Kumara Vyasa Bharata. So then I said, no, I have not even studied Kannada ever in my life. So then, ನೀವು ಚೆಕ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೀರಾ ಇದನ್ನೆಲ್ಲ, ನೀವು ಕನ್ನಡನೇ ನಿಮಗೆ ಏನೋ ಗೊತ್ತಿಲ್ಲ. So he was innocently asking. So I said, unfortunately, we don't have any devotee who can check this, who knows Kannada at the present time. We were just 4 devotees. What will we do? So anyway, I've studied Prabhupada's books in English. So I'll hold the English and you read the Kannada, and then I will try to, see if it is okay. The translation is okay. I know very little Kannada because my mother tongue is Kannada. So anyway, so then he would say, I would say, I also want to learn Kannada. So then he'll say, ನೀವು ಈ ಕುಮಾರವ್ಯಾಸ ಭಾರತ ಕಲಿಬೇಕು. And I'll say, Kumarvyasa Bharata, I don't even know the alphabet of Kannada. So I can't even read Kannada. So how will I study that? No, I will teach you. You come and just sit and hear first. And then he would actually recite the verses of Kumarvyasa Bharata, and he would explain them. Oh, just his recitation itself was so pleasing to hear. So pleasing to hear. Because many of the words I would not understand. Some words I would understand. And then when he would explain, then I will understand the whole thing. Yes, very simple Kannada he'll explain. And then the pleasure he takes in reciting, the pleasure he takes in explaining, looking at his face and hearing his expression, I would feel so nice. This is called pleasure in the mode of goodness. And I have experienced this even as a school student. When I was a middle school student, 5th standard, we had an English teacher. In that young age, he would recite Shakespeare's composition. And then he would explain that to us. And then we would all be, I would see the whole class, all the students, boys and girls, are sitting and hearing him so nicely explain. When he recites, we don't understand anything. We are in just 5th standard. We don't even have poetry that time. We don't have any poems to study. We studied only nursery rhymes, that's all, in kindergarten. So we would all sit and hear him explain and then tell the story associated with that play of Shakespeare. See, the pleasure in the my point is, the pleasure in the mode of goodness is not momentary pleasure. Why? Because it is not a pleasure of the gross senses. Gross senses are this tongue for tasting, ears for hearing, nose for smelling, the eyes for seeing, and the sense of touch. Now, these senses, these 5 senses, are the external senses. They are called Jnanendriya. This is all analyzed in the Bhagavatam. Bhagavad Gita, just a brief mention is there. 13th chapter, 6th verse. Indriyani dashaikamcha. Indriyani means the senses. 10 plus 1. Generally, we know 5 senses. But Bhagavad Gita will learn there are 10 plus 1, 11 senses. So, 5 senses I just mentioned. The senses of perception, senses of gathering knowledge. From the outside world, we get knowledge through these 5 senses in the shape of form, taste, smell, sound, and the touch sensation. Then there are the senses of action, karmendriya, the hands, which we use for performing activity. Senses of action. You do something with these senses. The hands, the legs, among all the 5 senses of action, the most important is this hand for gross materialists. What all, you can imagine what all a human being can do with the hands. Unlimited different things a person can do. Not one person, different people do different things. An artist, wonderful, let's say, sketching he will do. With the skill of his hand. With the skill of his hand. Wonders he does. A painter will do a beautiful painting. All these paintings done by Prabhupada's disciples who were trained by Prabhupada to draw such beautiful paintings. So, with the skill of the hand, a poet, formerly poets used to write. They will write wonderful poetry with the hand, skill of the hand. So like that, an expert surgeon, with the skill of the hand, he does wonderful surgery. Wonderful surgery. So like that, the skill of the hand, Matajis, with the skill of the hand, they cook. With the skill of the hand, they cook. So the same thing what they are doing now, artificial intelligence, they are trying to create some kind of machine where all the ingredients will be mixed in certain proportion and produced. Believe me, that can never be as tasty as that cooked by a skilled person, a skilled cook. Can never be as tasty. So, this skill of the hand is the sense of action. Hand is the sense of action. Now, you replace this hand with a machine to do the same thing, like what they're doing in artificial intelligence. That is okay for cleaning this floor. Even for cleaning the floor, it's not as good, by the way. But it can be a okay substitute for cleaning the floor. Instead of with a hand somebody doing, a person doing it, some machine will do it. Okay. But when it comes to cooking, when it comes to painting, when it comes to creating poems, writing, very, very poor substitute. Very poor substitute. So, hands, legs. Legs also, of course, the most primary function of the leg is to walk. But more than walking, there are so many other things we do with the leg. How do you know? You talk to people who are crippled, who can't walk because of some problem with the leg. They feel so much of inconvenience, so much handicapped they are. People are crippled. Even you get a small injury on your toe, how much you feel handicapped. So the leg, there is one lady who doesn't have hands. I saw a video in the YouTube. Somebody sent me that. And she somehow has trained her legs to do the works of the hand as much as possible. And amazing things she does with her two legs. So many things she does. Of course, after training, after receiving training. So you can do so many things with the legs. Just like football, soccer, what we call soccer or football. With the leg, how they play with that ball. It's a skill. It's a skill with the legs. Then there are musicians who play simultaneously many different instruments. And with the foot, they operate two different instruments, with the left foot and the right foot. Dancing, skilled dancers, how do they use their feet? Isn't it? Dancing. So even foot-operated different machines, nowadays not so much, but earlier they used to have harmonium. They'll play with both the hands, the keyboard, just like they play the keyboard now, the electronic keyboard. But the bellows were operated by the 2 feet. Formerly, even tailors, they used to do stitching on a foot-operated machine. So nicely they'll operate that machine with the feet, and with their hand they will do all that movement, and wonderful stitching they will do. Formerly, they used to do even embroidery work with the basic machine. I don't know whether you're aware of that. Now they have some specialized machines for embroidery. So my point is the hands, the feet. Then the third one, very important, is the voice, the organ of speech. So according to Bhagavad Gita, we act not only through these hands, legs, but also act through the voice, speaking, words. Kaya, vacha, manasa. Therefore, this organ of speaking is also called one of the organs of action. Then the organ of evacuation, passing stool, anus, and then the organ of reproduction, the genitals. So genitals are meant for creating progeny, for begetting children, yes. But how to use it for generating good population, for begetting good children? Sat Santana. Santana means children. Sat Santana, not Asat Santana. Suras generate Sura category of population. Daivi Swabhava create Devatas, not Asuras. Not Asuras, not demons. Demoniac natured population. No. They are a nuisance, they are a disturbance, they are a problem. for the whole world is demoniac natured persons. Asuri Swabhava, described in the Bhagavad Gita, 16th chapter. Daivi Swabhava, Asuri Swabhava. So, is there any kind of control? Sometimes modern day people may wonder, is there any control? What kind of child parents will have? Is there any control? Yes. Scriptures say yes. And the secret is revealed in the Bhagavad Gita. Dharma aviruddha bhuteshu kamosmi bharatarshabha. Krishna tells Arjuna, addressing him as the best of the Bharatas. Bharatarshabha. Bharatarshabha. That dharma aviruddha, that which is not against dharma, that kind of dharma is my representation. For what? Kamosmi. Kama here refers to the ability to beget children, to procreate. Sex life, which is not contrary to religious principles, is a representation of Krishna. 7th chapter, Krishna says this. So, this kind of sex life is exactly what is described. What did Prishni and Sutapa, Vasudeva, Devaki and Vasudeva in the previous life, the beginning of the millennium, what did they do? They first of all underwent severe austerities by controlling their senses. This controlling senses is also called purification of the senses. The senses ordinarily, for a conditioned soul, are contaminated. When we take birth as a conditioned soul, we are contaminated by desires for material enjoyment, and our senses we utilize only for the sake of getting some material pleasure. Just like these eyes. Eyes are used for seeing different forms. We perceive different forms. So, the eyes desire to see beautiful forms. Nothing wrong in that, desiring to see beautiful forms. But the choice of the kind of form, beautiful form we want to see, that is where the mistake that is committed by us. We desire to see materially beautiful forms. Materially beautiful forms. But such materially beautiful forms, because of the very nature of matter, it first of all, materially beautiful form does not have any life. It does not have any life. And secondly, material beauty is always temporary, flickering, momentary. So once we see, then the appreciation or the pleasure of experiencing the beautiful form is finished, over. And then material smell, any kind of pleasing fragrance. Momentarily, you smell, you get some pleasure, you enjoy that fragrance, and it's over, finished. So like this, all material pleasures by the sensation of smells, form, sensation of sound, sensation of touch, sensation of taste, everything is finished. And if we try to get more of it by repeating, doing the same thing, then there is saturation. We cannot hear again and again. Especially modern day cinema songs. When it is released, it is a big sensation. But after a few times people hear, they get bored. This is something new I want to hear. I'm tired of hearing the same thing again and again. So, this is true for the sounds which are material sounds in the mode of ignorance. In the mode of passion, the kind of experience is that which agitates the mind, not just agitates the senses, the gross senses. So as I said, mind is the sense within, the 11th sense. 5 Jnanendriya, 5 Karmendriya, and 1 sense within, internal sense, it's called the mind. With the mind, actually, we coordinate these Karmendriya and Jnanendriya to experience within the pleasure sensation. The pleasure sensation. So mind is the linking instrument between the external body, the external gross senses, and the soul, the Atma, the real you. You are not these senses or the body, external body. You're not the mind. You're not even the intelligence. You're not the false ego. You are the spirit, soul within, completely spiritual personality, spiritual being. So what are you doing with the material mind, the material senses, the material intelligence and the material ego? What are you doing? You're manipulating all this, trying to use all this for getting some material pleasure sensation. That sensation is actually experienced by the Atma. And that sensation also is facilitated by Paramatma. Because as spirit souls, we don't know what is matter. We cannot touch or smell or taste or do anything with matter. For us, matter is actually intangible. Just like material mind, you cannot see, you cannot smell, you cannot taste, you cannot do anything with your 5 senses about the material mind. But the material mind does exist, and we only come to know of its existence when the mind is disturbed, when the mind is filled with fear, when the mind is filled with anxiety, when the mind is stressed out, right? Somebody says, my mind is very disturbed. Where are we seeing? And how can we ever feel it? Your mind is disturbed. I cannot experience that. Just like you taste something very nice, you can give me the same thing and say, you taste it and see. Okay? Is it sweet or is it nice? So I may also taste and say, oh, yeah, it's nice. But if your mind is disturbed, you can only say, my mind is disturbed. Then I can't understand, I can't experience. What do you mean? How is it disturbed? Or what is the disturbance? I can't understand. I can't perceive. So mind is subtle. And the senses are all gross experience of form, taste, etc. Now, spiritual experience of the soul, of pleasure, or of beauty, or of taste is something else. That is the taste of prasadam. That's the experience of the beauty of Krishna's deity form. That is the experience of hearing melodious Krishna Kirtana. different from hearing ordinary cinema music. And the difference is very obvious to devotees at least, that a cinema song you can hear once or twice or a few times and then you get bored. But Krishna Kirtana, you can hear millions and billions of times and your pleasure will only increase. You can relish it more and more and more and more. So somebody may say, even material pleasure in the mode of goodness is like spiritual happiness. It's like I gave the example. Somebody studies some nice literature and then they relish it more and more as they go deeper into it. But then the defect in pleasure in the mode of goodness is it is highly dependent on the state of the mind, the intelligence, and the false ego, the subtle body. Just like reading Shakespeare's composition, some poem, or any literature, material literature, if the mind is disturbed, there's no possibility of enjoying or relishing or reading and experiencing some pleasure. No possibility. No possibility. So even pleasure in the mode of goodness is conditional. Is conditional based on the state of the mind, state of the intelligence, state of the ego, the ahankara. So this pleasure in the mode of goodness, material pleasure characteristically is not only very limited, but also conditional. It's conditional. It's not unconditional. Whereas the pleasure of chanting Hare Krishna, either japa or kirtana, is unconditional. It's unconditional. In fact, when my mind is disturbed, I chant Hare Krishna and my mind becomes pacified. You see? Mind becomes pacified. So, spiritual experience is of the soul, of the real you, real I, real person within the body. And it is not possible through these material senses to get that spiritual experience of spiritual pleasure. Not possible. In the 6th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, Sukham atyantikam yattad buddhi grahyam atindriyam. This word atindriya is very important. The highest pleasure, Sukham atyantikam yat, whatever is called spiritual pleasure or the highest pleasure, unlimited pleasure, unconditional pleasure, the real pleasure is atindriya. It is experienced through spiritual senses or transcendental senses beyond these material senses. It is even beyond the material mind. It is beyond the material mind. It is beyond even the material intelligence. Like materialists who may be very, very intelligent materially, they cannot understand what is the pleasure devotees get by every day chanting Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Hare Ram, Hare Ram, Ram, Hare. A materialist see this foolish fellow has become mad after doing this japa. Some japa he does Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. I don't understand what pleasure they get in that. If they talk to some devotee, they'll say, how can you keep on doing this chanting Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna? What is this Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna? What is this? What is pleasure? So they think we have got brainwashed. So-called material intelligent people, intellectuals say, you got brainwashed. Pagal ho gaya, become mad. Intelligence is not working properly. So he keeps on doing the same thing, same thing, same thing. And they even say that he has become kind of intoxicated by a philosophical doctrine. Because not only he keeps on doing it, he even tells others, you also do, you also do. He propagates it. He propagates it. Pagal ho gaya. He himself is mad and he wants to make others also mad. That's what he is doing. But to appreciate the real pleasure of chanting Hare Krishna or any spiritual activity is possible only through spiritual intelligence. That's why first time somebody reads, even if they are inclined spiritually, first time somebody reads Bhagavad Gita or Bhagavatam, even though Prabhupada is explained in very simple words, but difficult to understand. It's not because of the words, it's not because of the language, no. It's because we are not utilizing our inner spiritual intelligence to read. Habitually, we will use only our material intelligence, our material mind, and our material senses. Even to read Prabhupada's book, yes. With these eyes, with my mind, which has been trained to understand this letters combined into words, make meaningful sentences, whatever I learned in school or otherwise also, I'll read and try to understand. But what will I understand? Your spirit soul. You are deathless. Death means death of the body, not of the spirit. Doesn't make any sense. First time we hear. But when a devotee explains, and also devotee says, please start chanting to really understand better. And then a fortunate soul starts chanting and starts following the principles, spiritual principles, and starts reading and starts understanding, hearing, then it's a totally different experience. It's a different experience. And that different experience is through your inner spiritual intelligence, spiritual mind, spiritual senses. Like beyond this gross hands is an inner subtle hand. You can even say a mental hand. And beyond the mental hand is the intellectual hand, the intelligence body, if I may use that word. Intellectual body, mental body, intellectual body, ego body, the false ego, ahankara. And beyond all this is the spiritual form, which is not having different parts like our gross body has parts: heart, liver, hands, legs, eyes, ears, nose. Our subtle body also has got parts: the mind, the intelligence, and the false ego, ahankara, made up of three different elements: manas, buddhi, ahankara. But the spiritual body is not made up of any parts. Your spirit soul, you are that spiritual form. You are the spiritual eyes. There are no separate parts. Okay? Like this part, gross body, they're all parts. Eye, they do some eye surgery, right? Or they do heart surgery. Mind, can you do any surgery? It's subtle. But still, the subtle body has got three different distinct parts called manas, buddhi, ahankara. That also we cannot understand in the beginning. What is the difference between mind and intelligence? Or mind and the false ego? So we understand what is false ego when you say, I feel very hurt by his criticism, by somebody scolding. Small children nowadays, they become very, very uh, uh, disturbed or upset with the parents. The parents just slightly, mildly rebuke them. Why? Because of a sense of false ego. Because of a sense of false ego. What is hurt when the parents scold the child? We think it's a mind which is hurt. Emotions are affected. No. Emotions getting affected is different. Emotions getting affected is when there is an injury and there's a feeling of pain, then the emotion of that pain leads to crying or feeling the pain, feeling some discomfort. That is the seat of emotions, mind. Whereas false ego has nothing to do with this physical injury or physical experience of anything or physical actions. It is something to do with a sense of identity. I never make a mistake, and somebody says you have made a mistake. My false ego is hurt. My false ego is hurt. Then my mind doesn't work. My intelligence will not work. And my senses are impossible to even move or do anything. So the ego is, what we say ego, it's actually not the real ego, it's a false ego, but real ego is spiritual ego. Spiritual ego is, I am spirit soul. I am not this body, I am not the mind, I am not the intelligence, I am not the false ego. I am beyond all this. I am spirit soul means I am devotee of Krishna. Devotee of the Supreme Lord. I have a loving relationship with him. He is my topmost well-wisher, etc. That is real ego, real identity. That identity is covered and we have forgotten for the time being. And that is not a separate part of our spiritual form or spiritual identity or spirit soul. Spirit soul means all these functions for one thing called the spirit. You, I, each person. A complete individual entity. You means complete individual entity. And you're eternally that. Whether you are conditioned, whether you are liberated, whether you are in the spiritual world, whether you are devotee, whether you are non-devotee, it doesn't matter. You are that. So when Upanishads say you are that, that means what? Your spirit, your spirit soul. So the Mayavadis conveniently say you are that means you are the absolute truth or the ultimate reality. Anyway, that's a big subject. So spiritual ego, spiritual mind, spiritual intelligence is different. And to train the spiritual, just like the material intelligence we can train by sending the child to school or teaching it some mathematics or whatever subject or teaching some skill, carpentry, etc. or using the hands. These are all material education, material training, material skills that can be acquired by the hands or by the intelligence can be trained or the mind can be trained in enacting different dramas, making facial expressions to make people laugh, to make people feel sad, right? All that skill of the mind, skill of the intelligence, skill of the ego, how not to become hurt when people scold you. That also some training is there. Some management training or some kind of whatever training. But the spiritual training is different. Spiritual training is how to chant Hare Krishna, by which you awaken your spiritual intelligence, your spiritual senses, your spiritual mind, your spiritual identity itself. Simply by chanting Hare Krishna under the guidance of Prabhupada, spiritual master, following the rules, regulation, the principles. Anyone can awaken their spiritual faculties. Anyone can do it. It works regardless of who you are or what your background is. It works because you are spirit soul. And in the human form of life, it is very easy. It's very easy. You merely have to use your tongue, which you use anyway for vibrating so many sounds. Use it for vibrating Hare Krishna. This Hare Krishna mantra. That's all. And then, initially we just say vibrate. Okay, vibrate. Anything more to be done? Yeah, you also have to hear the same sound. Hare Krishna. How are you repeating? First time I tell you Hare Krishna, you hear and you repeat. You hear and repeat. But hearing is not just for merely being able to repeat. No. Hearing is more than that. Hearing is also trying to hear with attention. Attentively hear. What is the sound? Hare, Hare. It's got a meaning. It's not just a combination of two sounds, Ha, Ra, and A. No, it is not just that. That is for the writing. How to write this Hare in any language. The sounds represented by the alphabet, you have to write H-A-R-E in English, or in Sanskrit, Ha, Ra, A. Sanskrit or Kannada. But beyond that, the meaning of the word. Meaning of the word Hare. So many meanings you can find in the dictionary. Right? Beyond dictionary meaning is the spiritual meaning that gives the material meaning of the word, used for communicating. It is for reference. But actual meaning of the word Hare, Radharani, Krishna's topmost devotee. That means a lot. Hare means Radharani. And Hare is addressing Hara. Radharani's name is Hara. And we are addressing her. Oh, Srimati Radharani. Jai Radhe. Hey Radhe. It's a vocative. Hare of Hara. So, that way addressing Radharani, you hear that address. Hare Krishna. Addressing Krishna. Oh, my dear Lord Krishna. And also, by just chanting that, by uttering those words as a prayer, hearing that, and also applying our mind, our intelligence for understanding the real meaning, our mind for actually making sense of these utterances as a prayer. We are praying. And Krishna will respond to that prayer. Krishna will respond to that prayer. First of all, what will he do? He will cleanse your material contamination, covering the spiritual senses, the spiritual mind, the spiritual intelligence, spiritual ego. He'll cleanse those material contamination and awaken your actual spiritual being, spiritual senses. And with those spiritual senses, when you hear, when you chant, when you try to understand the meaning, when you try to appeal to Krishna, please engage me in your service. Please get me out of this material existence. Please help me understand that you are my most beloved Lord. You are my topmost well-wisher. So that prayer, and Krishna responds to that prayer, and then you experience the highest spiritual pleasure. And that is spiritual sex also. What is spiritual sex? using our spiritual senses for spiritual purpose, for rendering devotional service to Krishna, for the sake of experiencing the highest spiritual pleasure, that of love, spiritual love between ourselves and Krishna. That's nothing to do with this material sex or material activity or material emotion, material intelligence, material ego, nothing to do with that. So that is what Prishni and Sutapa did. They controlled their senses, these external gross senses, the internal subtle senses, and the intelligence and the material intelligence and the material ego in order to awaken. Of course, they don't have to awaken, they're pure devotees, but they're teaching us by their example. Pure devotees teach by their example. So they underwent tapasya. So we also have to do tapasya. So what is tapasya prescribed for us for awakening our spiritual senses and coming to spiritual life? Is we have to chant Hare Krishna. We have to vibrate the tongue, we have to hear with our ears, and we also have to hear attentively with our mind. And with our intelligence, try to understand the real meaning of this, beyond just the word meaning. It's a prayer. And understanding that meaning, attentively hearing, chanting, counting a fixed number of times you should do it. Fixed number of times, at least 108 times you do that. And addition to that, you also taste Krishna Prasadam. Krishna Prasadam. You also participate in Kirtan. You also participate in the worship, Arati. You also take some Charanamrit and taste that, relish that. Like this, so many small things you add to this chanting japa, Hare Krishna. And then that is the tapasya you have to do. Begin with. And slowly later on you understand something called sinful activities, of which 4 are the principal, primary sinful activities. You have to consider stopping them. Stopping them. No illicit sex, no gambling, no intoxication, no meat eating. And then gradually more and more avoiding all kinds of material activities and increasing spiritual activities. And then you're on the path of perfection. And stop here. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Some announcements. I touched something wrong. Sankirtan in Mysore Palace. They are celebrating Dasara. So they invite different artists. Of course, I don't claim we are artists, great artists, but they've invited us to perform Sankirtan on the 10th of October, Thursday, from 5. Please hear. Don't clap. Please hear. If you clap, then whatever I've read, they miss out. They don't get the actual announcement. On 10th of October, coming Thursday, 10th of October, from 5:15 p.m. to 6 p.m., we'll be performing Sankirtan in the palace. In the main stage, there are different stages, different platforms for performing these different cultural activities. So on the main stage, we're going to perform. Now we request all of you to come and be in the audience for this Sankirtan, because you will not be a passive audience. As you know, Sankirtan is never done by only us. We will also we will lead on the stage and you follow. We request all the audience to follow. But you are all devotees, you know what is Kirtan. So please come, participate by being present there and following in the Sankirtan. And last 10 minutes, we will even have dancing. 45 minutes, 35 minutes will be sitting down. All will be sitting down on nice chairs. We'll be seated on the stage and we will do sitting bhajan. Then also you can follow, but sitting. And then the kirtan, standing kirtan, will also dance. We'll also dance on stage. You'll also be able to join the dancing. Last 10 minutes. And we request all men devotees to come in dhoti and kurta with tilak, and women devotees to come in sari with tilak. This is a request. Of course, you can come even otherwise. Normal dress also you can come. But if you come with that, then we can actually represent ourselves as coming from this temple, and inviting people, other strangers who come, those who don't know about this temple or don't know about anything about kirtan, can tell them, please come to our temple. Every day we have kirtan. Every Sunday we have special kirtan. So we can invite them by just being present there in this dress. Okay. Then we'll be celebrating Dasara on 12th of October, Saturday, from 6 p.m. in the evening. We'll have Rama Ashtottara Shatanamavali, this puja in this temple hall. And then after that, we will take the deities of Krishna and Balaram dressed as Ram Lakshman in Palaki to the site where we're going to have Ravan Dahan. And we will perform Harinams and Kirtan, and you will hear something about the glories of the Harinams and Kirtana. And there will be the burning of Ravana and Kumbhakarna effigies, 45 feet tall effigies this time. We're going to make and burn them at the end of this festival. No, that's not the end. That's just before the end. At the end, we will have prasadam for all of you. So please come and join us for this celebration also. Hare Krishna.